Hi and welcome to the second part of disks and partitions. In this part what we'll do is we'll look at the third and last partition tool, which is called partition editor or parted, and then we'll look at swap, how you can add virtual memory to your environment, and we will check out the make file system tool or MKFS to create file systems of different types. Now let's first start with lsblock once more to check which disks are in use and which are available. Well, in the previous video we created some partitions, but we did not touch SDD, so let's use that one. Like with fdisk or gdisk, you can specify the device you want to use with parted. Now the difference is when we run the help, it gives us a completely different view as what we are used to with fdisk or gdisk. So this is a completely different tool that has a different syntax. So there are some commands like make label, make table, print, which looks pretty nice, and some other stuff. Now let's just run print. And it tells me when I run print, it says, well, there's an error. There's an unrecognized disk label. So we don't have a label on this disk. And it's called /dev SDD, and it's 1 GB in size, more or less, and we have no knowledge of any partition table. So my best bet would be first create a partition table so that we have somewhere to start. So we run help make table, and when we do that, it will tell us that we can create a table of the following. So we could say we want to have AIX, Amiga, BSD, but also GPT and MS-DOS. Now let's just go for MS-DOS. So we are going to create a table, a partition table that we also created using fdisk, so to say. So we run make table MS-DOS. That's it. Now we check that table using print. It tells us that now we have a partition table which is called MS-DOS. Now we run print free and it tells us that we have some space, like about 1 GB of free space. So we could create a partition. So we run mkpart and let's create a primary partition. And the file system type, we didn't discuss types yet, so we're simply going to stick with the default. Also, it doesn't really create a file system, it just gives us some settings, but we can override those later when we actually start creating a file system. So we give a space and we end it at 100 megabytes, and it says, well, it's not properly aligned. For best performance, we ignore that. We print and we've got a partition. So that's our first partition on SDD. Now we create a second one and we're going to mangle with the sizes a little bit. So we're going to start at 101. And then we're going to finish at 202, let's say. And this will give us an unequal size. So this is not 100 megabytes, this is 102 megabytes in size. I regret that. So I first quit to prove that it's already written. So whatever you've done, it's on the disk. I run lsblock again and I see that I have SDD1 and SDD2. So I don't have to write like with fdisk or gdisk. It does it automatically. Now when I run parted again, and I'm going to remove that second partition. I don't need that because I don't like it. So I do remove partition 2, I do quit, I run the lsblock once more, and I see that I'm very happy. Now I have a single partition, which is right-sized a little bit. As you can see, it's not 100 megabytes exactly. Still, we used fdisk, gdisk, and parted. These three tools can be used to partition your disk devices. You should know of these for the exam. Now let's have a look at swap. Let's first check out what it actually is and what a swap device or swap file is. And then we also have to look at some commands, which is make swap or mk swap and swap on, basically to enable it. Let's check it out. Let's have a look at it. Now every program you start will need space in memory, and this memory is divided into chunks of memory called pages, and swapping is the process whereby a page of memory is copied to a pre-configured space on the hard disk. And that space is called a swap space, or it can also be a swap file, just to free up that page in memory, because memory is of course not infinite. And if the program needs these pages back in memory again, they will simply be paged in to memory, if necessary. The combination of your random access memory and the swap device is usually referred to as virtual memory. Now let's first create a swap device using mkswap. As you remember, we have /dev sdc1 and we can use that to create a swap device. So we run mkswap and it will create a swap device on sdc1. Then we enable that by running swap on. And if we want to see a summary, all we have to do is run swap-on-s and it will give us the overview of the existing swap that was defaulted when we installed the system and a new swap device that we created just a second ago. We can also create a file using dd with the /dev0 device as the input file and any file name that we want to use as the output file, the block size and the count. And in this case we create 105 megabytes of space on disk in a file. So what we do is we run mkswap /swap file, and after we've created the swap file we can enable that by running swap on and then specify the file name. Again, if we need the summary, we run swap-on-s, and now we have a total of 3 swap devices, one of which is a file called swap file. And if we want to get rid of that, we can easily do that by running swap off. So we first run swap off /swap file, and then we run swap off /dev /sdc1. And we will be back to where we started. We have the original swap device that was set up during installation. And as the last command of this module, we're going to kind of preview the next module in which we'll look at file systems a little bit further. In this last part, we'll see how to create a file system on a partition. Now, the command we're going to use is mkfs, or make file system. And since there are many file system types, we have to specify the type of file system we want to create. Common file systems on Linux are the x2, x3 and x4 file systems. And these have been around for quite some time and differ in flexibility and in reliability. A very revolutionary file system is the B3 file system or butter file system, or as it's used in the -t option, the BFS file system. This is one that's on the rise, so this is a coming file system. Of course, we've also got NTFS, the Windows file system, and VFAT, which is the DOS file system. XFS is another Linux file system that you can use. By the way, this is the default file system for your root environment during a CentOS installation. This module is not about all the different qualities. We just want to make sure that you're aware of them. One file system that was famous for a very long time, but is now on its way out because the one and only developer is no longer able to develop, is RiserFS. That's a name you should maybe record for if you do the exam. Like the other types, of course. Also, you should realize that the mkfs command is a front end to the actual file system creation command. And this command, this actual command, is called depending upon the option you specify. Well, let's just do it. So let's first run the mkfs command without any arguments. And it tells us that, well, we didn't specify the type. We don't have to because it's an option. But what we should definitely specify is the device we want to create a file system on. So the type is not really necessary. So if we leave out the type and we simply specify /dev sdc1, what it creates is the x2fs file system. So there is a default that it will create if you leave out the -t. So we have inodes. This is the number of inodes that we have. And maybe you remember what a superblock was. There are multiple superblocks. These are all backup superblocks. So this means that if the first superblock fails, so the active superblock, then the file system can be repaired using one of those remaining backup superblocks. And let's check what command is actually executed when you run mkfs. By default, it will be the binary mkfs.x2. And if we create a file system of the type x4, it will use the mkfs.x4. So to summarize what we did in this module, we had a look at the parted partition tool, which was like the G-disk and F-disk tool, but then a little bit more modern. We also had a look at the mk-swap command to create a swap device and enable that using swap on. To summarize it, we could use the -s option, and with swap off, we simply disabled the swap device. And mkfs, a very important command to create file systems of a particular type. And I definitely hope this module was useful to you, and maybe see you in the next one.